Hey Anne, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. This is, like always I kind of say the same thing every time, but like this is the um off family, like off everything time that I have for me. So, like it's always an enjoyable moment that I have. First and foremost, pretty much the usual question that I've been asking for almost the last year, but where are you located on that planet? And how has been going with the pandemic for you so far?
I'm in California, Northern California. I'm actually originally from England, so I have a little bit of a mixed accent. Pandemic's been actually okay for me. It hasn't affected me too much. It's affected my teenage son more. But I use everything these days that come up as a way to do deeper and deeper inner work. So whatever emotions come up have been
Yep.
coming up through this. I've just worked with them and moved on.
There are there I'm guessing strong parallels between where I am in Quebec, which is considered some of the stronger confinement rules and the stronger vaccination rules, and California, right? I mean, besides other states in the US, how has been, what's the latest on kind of the confinement and, like the some of the sanitary rules? What is the latest on that for you in Cali?
I believe mask requirements have just been let go this past week, except for school children. So, but I'm still
Okay.
finding, there's still notices on supermarket doors, and those are still there. But most people, it seems like, are no longer wearing masks. So, yeah, I don't hear
Okay.
a lot
So
about it.
masks are gone.
Yes.
Awesome. And I guess cinemas, like shows and like auditorium or theaters are all full capacity, like everything around that. You guys are pretty much free, except unfortunately kids at school.
Yeah, as of this week, it sounds like things are opening up. But as I said, I didn't really feel it a lot here where I am. So it's actually been okay.
All right. So let's like I say, like let's get back to regular scheduling and like when I do start with, like my guest's life story, I ask them to rewind their life story back to, mostly their childhood, but more importantly, what I would consider kind of a major event or something that has, um, by by my guess own definition, something that has changed or defined them as they grew up. So where would you bring me back to, Anne?
Well, there were a lot of traumatic things that happened in my childhood, but obviously some of them were stored subconsciously. So when I was aware of them more, it would more be both my parents being alcoholic during my teenage years. Um, I remember telling myself that life was hell. But it
Wow.
wasn't actually until a little bit later. It was when I was 19 was the key event, when I woke up one morning and I found my mother dead in the bathroom.
Oh shit. Okay, I'm just gonna and sorry for like sorry I shouldn't have laughed, but like it's not because it's funny. It's just that we're moving too fast here. Um,
Okay.
let's let's rewind it back just a tiny bit little here. Um, what like so what's your upbringing like in terms of like the fraternity, brothers, sisters? You mentioned both your parents, so I'm guessing they were together. What's your upbringing like?
Okay, well, I can go back to the very beginning. So I was actually I was born with my right foot up against my right shin. So the first 6 weeks of my life were physical therapy,
Okay.
and that was prior to be given away for adoption. I had to have my foot straightened before I was allowed to be adopted. So I was then adopted into a family where they had a boy, a 2 year old boy, my brother Paul, and then they had adopted another little girl, and they had had her for 6 months. And back then in the UK, I don't know if it's changed now, but back then the birth mother could change her mind up to 6 months. And this birth mother did change her mind. So this little girl that had been in the family was given back to her birth mother, and I was the replacement for her.
Okay.
So that would have been me moving into a family that had just undergone a big trauma. So my brother never really liked me, and that could have been the reason, that he knew this little girl, and then I was somehow replaced, or she was replaced with me. So yeah, so my
How much older was E?
he was 2 years older, so not a
Okay.
lot. Yeah.
Okay.
And then as soon as I was 6 months old and they knew that they were going to keep me, we went overseas. So I lived on 4 continents, 5 different countries by the time I was 16. So we went to Barbados first, then Sierra Leone in West Africa, then Hong Kong, and then Bahrain. And at the age of 9, so we were living in Hong Kong, my brother and I were sent to boarding school in England, and I was sent to his school. So I was actually the first girl boarder in a boys' boarding school, which someone said to me the other day that, well, that could be fun, but it was not fun. They
No
teased me
doubt.
mercilessly.
Especially at that age, right? Like girls are yuck and boys, like the boys are yuck. So, like it's not, like it's not the best time. Like if you told me that at like at your teenage years, maybe. But like um, the other question I have for you is, what was the reason for moving? Was it professional?
Yes, my dad worked in the telecommunications,
Okay.
big telecommunications company. Yeah.
Was alcohol present from your earliest memories?
It was, alcohol, it seemed to me, is much more prevalent in England because people go to pubs all the time. That's where the social gatherings happen. So, even though we'd lived overseas, that was part of my parents' upbringing, was socializing with alcohol. So yeah, that was normal.
And let me ask furthermore, was abuse of alcohol present as as early as you remember as well?
No, I don't think so. They did drink a lot, but it wasn't obvious to me that they were drinking too much. It wasn't
Okay.
until yeah, it wasn't until our teenage years. My mother actually asked my brother and I, he was 15 and I was 13, and we were living back in England at the time. And she asked us if it would be okay if she left our dad. And we both said no. We weren't going to stay with dad. He had anger issues as well. And so I think, I don't know because she's not here, but I think that was probably the moment that she kind of gave up on life and
Yeah.
just kept drinking.
So your parents are in Asia, you are in London. So how often do you visit home, like your parents?
Well, in England, in that boarding school, in those boarding schools, there were 4 terms, kind of 4 semesters a year.
Okay.
So there would be 4 vacations a year, 3 vacations a year. So we would go back and forth. It was a very long flight to go from England to Hong Kong, but we would do that, and occasionally they would come to visit us. And then after 2 years at the boys' boarding school, I then went to a girls' boarding school for the rest of my schooling until I went to university.
And I'm guessing that as you grow, and after that shocking question from your mother, as you grow, you come back for vacation and you see your mother slowly going down that hill or that slope.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's when they were both. I mean, my dad would come home for months at a time because he lived overseas. He would get these chunks of time where he wouldn't be working. And he would go to the pub and then come back absolutely plastered. And then she would start drinking when he came home. So the rest of the day, she was a different person than she was in the morning. And so, life was chaotic in my mind because I couldn't trust anything they said after a certain time of day because the next day would change. And yeah, it was a pretty chaotic time. That
Looking back, do you think your father knew that, like either she wanted to leave and, kind of, um, didn't because of, like the kind of quote unquote keeping the family together, or um, the fact that your father drank a lot as well, you think it was related to that?
that's interesting. I've actually never thought about that before. I don't know. I don't know if he knew that she wanted to leave. He must have known how
Hmm.
unhappy she was.
I mean,
So,
no doubt about it. I mean, like if you come down to asking your own kids, like, should I leave? Like it shows a lot of there's desperation in there, right? Like there's definitely, like if you have a hard time even making up your own mind about, like, I want to leave, but should I? And asking young teenagers, like it's for me it's either like a sign of um mental health issue, right? Like, and like from my understanding of what you're telling me, like that's not what we're referring to or talking about, and or mostly desperation, like mostly despair, where you just don't know, who to ask, and I'm guessing your mother didn't have many friends, didn't she?
no, not many friends, plenty of relatives and several siblings, but she just didn't, she can't have had the self confidence because, right, ideally, she would have made that decision herself and she
No
wouldn't be
doubt.
asking us. Yeah.
um so if you forward this, so sorry about that. When you do when realizing that, like you see kind of that um augmentation and, like kind of rise in consumption of alcohol, do you, like do you voice out the fact that you can actually witness that? Do you talk about this, or is this taboo in the home?
Yeah, we don't talk about it. No, we don't talk. We didn't talk about anything like that. So, um, you know, as time went on, my mother's health started to deteriorate. She also had, she was a chain smoker, both of them were, and she had a really bad smoker's cough. And eventually she did go to the doctor, and we were told that she had terminal cancer from lung and throat cancer, and we only ever talked about that one day. We were told about it. We were told that there was nothing that she could do. She didn't even stop smoking. And that was it. We never mentioned it again, which seems so strange right now. I mean, even in California, that seems like a strange thing, but that's what we did. We didn't know any different. That was the water that we lived in. And yeah, we
Wow.
just didn't know any different.
Even between brothers and sisters, there were no conversation around that?
Nope. Nope.
Wow. So it was
I know.
that much taboo, right? It was that's crazy because you have to keep to
Yeah.
yourself that you're sad that your mom is literally dying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, dad really did have anger issues. So we learned not to say anything. It was actually safer not to say anything. I mean, any opinion I had about anything was always wrong. So I remember deciding it's okay, I'm not going to voice my opinion because there's no point. So that was just part of the journey.
So for this to that fatal night. Can you bring me back to that night? Like, is it any different in terms of kind of the evening of it, or is there anything that like you could like I'm asking kind of blindly what happened just before all of that kind of uncovered.
Right. She was totally, I mean, she would drink a bottle of sherry a night, a day. So she would nearly fall over, so I would kind of catch her. And that night I had actually gone out with some friends to drink, which was totally unusual for me. I hardly ever did that. And I'd actually had an argument with her because she didn't want me to go out. But there was no sign that she was going to die that night. There, there was no there was no reason why that would happen that night. So the next morning I woke up and it was quiet. Normally she had the radio on and there was total silence. My brother was staying at his girlfriend's house and I didn't know who she was. I'd never met her. And my dad was working in Saudi Arabia at the time. So I really needed to pee. So I went to the bathroom and she was lying there in a pool of blood. She actually had one of the tumors in her throat had burst, which was why she ended up dying that night. She would cough constantly. I mean, it was really hard to have a conversation with her because she would always be coughing, and she was trying to obviously get rid of those things in her throat, and she probably felt a little satisfaction at actually being able to do that, but it killed her. So yeah, so that was a big shock.
How old were you again?
I was 19.
And so, in terms of your academia and like you kind of your academic aspirations and all, like where are you at this time?
I was in my first year of college. I was back home. I was doing what they call in England a thin sandwich course. So I had 6 months of industry interweaved between 6 months of college. So I was doing an industrial placement. So I was at home working at a company during the day. Yeah, so that's why I was home during that time frame. And I
And
had to
and
find my brother and I had to call my dad. And yeah.
you talked about like having drinks that night. What was your relation with alcohol?
Not much. I didn't really like it. Being adopted into a family, there's some of it's nurture, some of it's nature, and I never really liked it. Whereas my brother, who was adopted from a different family, he went that direction. He's actually already died. He died at 52 or 53, I don't remember, from multiple organ failure from drinking so much alcohol over those years. So yeah, with me, it wasn't much.
Um, so your mother passes. You find all of the kind of the family to come back together. What happens next? I mean, like how like you talked about your father having um anger issues and all that. Like I'm guessing that like that doesn't solve it, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously he was sad. He got my brother and me together, and he told us that he had never wanted to have children, which wasn't so great
Oh,
to hear at that moment.
yeah.
And really, life just carried on because we didn't talk about it. Right? We didn't know how to do that, so it just carried on. He wanted me to cook Christmas dinner for the family, even though I've never cooked a turkey in my life. He just kind of expected me to take over the household chores that my mum had done. And so I didn't want to do that. So I actually finished college. I had got a degree in computer science and I moved out to California when I was 21.
Wow. Okay. So in terms of like your personal being, how are you? Like I mean, this must have been like we're talking about post trauma post-traumatic disorder syndrome level, right? Like if you
Yes.
find any human being that, I mean, like even more so your own mother. Um, how are you? Like even like when you say you moved to Cali, how are you? Like in terms of your mental health and kind of your stability in life and yeah.
Yeah, I was really good at hiding it. But yes, I did have PTSD. I was very much trying to stay safe all the time, trying to not be shouted at, trying not to hide my true self underneath, because I never felt it was good enough or that I was good enough. So it was tricky, um, but I was really good at hiding it.
And why California? Why the US?
Well, I was luckily enough to meet my now husband when I was 18, 6 weeks before he moved out to California. So we stayed in touch for the remainder of my college years, and I moved out here. He was here in California, so I moved out, and I had a degree in computer science, and he was living near Silicon Valley, so it was actually perfect.
Um, how do you cope? Like even though like you're good at hiding it, like most of the time, like this bursts at some point in your life, right? Like it has to emerge and it has to evacuate. Like how, when, and how, and how does this happen?
Well, I tried to stuff it down. I used food for quite a while. Then I started doing cleanses and fasts and doing a lot of dietary things to see if I could clean myself out, at least the physical part of me. But it wasn't until I actually had my two boys and I was a stay at home mother, and I had like a business altercation that happened with a couple of other mothers at school who were very strong, self confident, authority figure mothers. And that was the key. And so my mind started spinning, like it would go around and around what happened, because I didn't think I'd done anything wrong, yet they thought I'd done something wrong. And it was at that point that I realized that, this kind of feels like how I would react when dad told me I'd done something wrong. And that was kind of the first inkling in my mind that my childhood was affecting me in the present. So that was
Literally
the
a
very
trigger.
first thing.
Yeah, literally a
Yes.
trigger. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Replaying something that I had done in the past.
and hidden and kind of even like just buried deep inside yourself.
Yeah. And I didn't know all those years, I didn't know that that was there.
You talked about your relationship with food. What was it? Are we talking bulimia? Are we talking like what was that relation um with food and food intake?
It was along those lines. I mean, I would eat to keep those feelings suppressed. So I would always think about, okay, what's the next meal? What am I going to have next? Which is, I know now, it's just a way of holding down those feelings that wanted to come up. And it's like, nope, I want to keep you right down where you are.
Wow. Um, okay, so that event happened. Um, what happens next? I mean, like, because like it must feel almost like an explosion, right? Within you.
Well, that period of time was, I mean, that was a huge event for me that I just couldn't understand, but I was ready at this point to start understanding it. So it was around this time frame that I actually had a doctor's appointment. I don't remember why I went to the doctor at the time, but he recognized I was more stressed than I should be, because I was a stay-at-home mom with two young boys. It shouldn't have been that stressful. But he recognized it was, and he asked me on a scale of 0 through 10 how stressed I was, and I said 8. And then he asked me why. And that's when I knew those tears from finding my mother, which now was like 2 decades earlier, those tears were still just under the surface. As soon as I would think about it, they would start coming out. So, so that was really eye opening. And he used this technique with me. It's called emotional freedom technique, and it's also called tapping. So he tapped with me for about 15 minutes. And I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story of her death in my mind without the tears there. And to me, that was just mind blowing to actually find something that could release those tears so quickly.
What is the plan by then? I mean, like, do you know, like you said, you were ready to actually make your life better, and like kind of um, clean yourself from these past, like trouble issues. Like, so what is the action plan? Like, I mean, like, sure, that doctor can relieve momentarily by making you cry, but like, is there an action plan in terms of like making you feel better, more than like than the tapping?
There wasn't an action plan, no. But I went home, and because I have this engineering background, I like to know something works. So I wanted to know that this technique, that his use of it with me was not just a one-off, that it actually really did work. So we had a 17-year-old cat at home, and we'd been told he needed a daily saline shot. So the first time I gave him a shot, my hand was shaking so much because I was so afraid of doing this. I was afraid of hurting him. And so I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it every day because it was just ridiculous the way my hand was shaking. So I thought, well, this is a great test case for this technique. I'd learn how to use it because it's really easy to learn. And so I tapped. I tapped about my fear of hurting my cat, my fear of giving him an injection. I tapped about my history with injections because I'd had so many over my lifetime. And the next day, when I gave him the shot, the needle just slid right in, and my hand was totally calm. So I knew at that point that I could use this technique and I could go back in my childhood or use it throughout the day. If I was finding myself emotional, I could let go of that emotion, that energy myself, because I didn't have a lot of trust in other people. I wasn't very vulnerable, wasn't willing to be vulnerable with other people. My dad had shut that out of me. So I knew I needed to do something myself. And so I started using this technique. I started doing it every day, noticing when I was emotional, and then I would tap, and I found my mind becoming quiet and less reactionary.
Like, so how do you progress, and like, kind of that, like, growing, how do you progress into that?
Well, I found my mind becoming quiet. So I wanted more of that because it felt really good. So I wrote down every childhood memory that I could think of. And I went through them one each night. I tapped for about an hour to an hour and a half each night. And I just found myself becoming lighter, like feeling lighter, like that burden is being lifted off my shoulders. And my mind was becoming quiet. I remember opening the door, the kitchen door one day, and just thinking to myself, it feels like I'm living in a different reality, because my mind, which always used to be going, it always used to be talking, used to be judging me and criticizing other people. And that was no longer there. That voice, which I realized was my dad's voice, was no longer in my mind talking to me. And it just felt incredibly different. So that was kind of actually the first step of 3 steps along my journey.
What is the coming step then?
Then I started to become aware of not just my emotions, but the physical sensations underneath the emotions, right? So we use the words like sadness or frustrated or depressed, but what we're actually describing is a set of physical sensations that then we call frustration, right? And frustration for me might be tension in my solar plexus, it might be tension in my jaw. And I just used the word frustration to describe that. So I started to become aware of those physical sensations. And then I would hold my awareness on the physical sensations and notice if I held my awareness on them long enough, it would shift and it would let go of the tension. And so I would do it over and over again with the same thought that had emotion behind it. And I could just let go of the emotion. And at some point, so I'll move on to the third step now. At some point, I actually noticed I could keep my awareness inside my body. And then I could move my awareness around and I could feel tension on the inside. And I would do the same thing. I would hold my awareness on the tension long enough that it would shift. And then I would do it again and again and again until the physical tension had released. And then at some point, I realized I could actually keep my awareness inside my head. And inside there, that tension was so amazing inside my head because my whole body was kind of torqued. I believe from having my foot up against my shin when I was born, I don't think that tension released throughout my body. So it was still in my head and my skull. So I would just work on this little by little. And I realized I was releasing tension in the connective tissue of the body. And over time, I could actually feel my skull bones releasing and relaxing into a more aligned position. And that's why it was great last year to get some new x rays taken for my orthodontic work and actually see the physical changes in my skull that have resulted. I knew it was happening, but to actually see an x ray of how my jaw, which was way off to the side, is now more centered. And my eye sockets have aligned. I didn't even know that. I didn't even know those bones could shift that way. And my neck, which was pretty not straight, it's much straighter than it was. And I've grown half an inch since I was last measured until just a couple of weeks ago. I know I've grown half an inch, which is all because of this release of tension on the inside.
That's crazy.
We're powerful beings.
We are. We are.
Yeah.
So I guess when you make those discoveries, what's like what do you want to do with that? I mean, like that must have feel like like 1,000 pounds is off your shoulders, right?
Right. And life changes as a result of that, right? I think in terms of the law of attraction, which you've probably heard about, but I think of it in a slightly different way. I know people talk about it in terms of manifestation. I'm just talking about on a day-to-day basis that we are emitting a signal and we're attracting back into our future based on our signal. So if I'm feeling light and peaceful, that's what I'm attracting back into my future. So that's kind of how I worked it. I would ask myself, how am I feeling right now? And do I want to feel this way again in the future? And if I didn't, then I would do something right now. Like even taking a deep breath would relax me. But I would more likely do some tapping or actually feeling those physical sensations to release that tension. And then my signal is different. So life has changed, right? I'm pretty much everything about my life has changed. I enjoy life now. I have a depth of awareness on the inside that I see on the outside, right? That phrase, as within, so without, is so true. I recognize when I'm tense on the inside or where the tension is, whether I'm breathing deeply or not. And I can see that in other people. Also, my senses have improved, right? Taste, the sense of taste is just amazing. My voice has changed. My singing voice has changed. Not that I will ever sing to anyone else, but when I sing to myself, I can actually sing notes that I could never sing before because the tension in my skull, which is where the voice, that's my echo chamber, that has released tension. So it sounds better. So there's all sorts of aspects to life that change as a result of doing this inner work.
How much do like my guess is that when you discover kind of that toolkit, you want to share it with everyone.
Yeah, that's why I'm here. I do. I want everyone to know how powerful we are because I've not heard other people talk about this. I didn't know I could get this deep inside my body. I didn't know it was possible, 5, 10, 15 years ago. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. I'm no different from anyone else.
And how long does that whole process took for you to get better, or like I have optimal in terms of like kind of expression in my in my mind.
Well, I'm still working on it. I still have tension on the inside, but it's not as intense as it was. So, I'm 55 now. I started in my late 30s. So it's just been an ongoing process, but my mind started to become quiet very quickly. I mean, even after being at that doctor's office that one day, I felt different because I had released that tension around my mother's death. So it's just a journey.
Wow. And how much like what was your did you build a plan to actually share this with like the people?
Well, I wrote a book. I wrote a book about my story. Once was able to put my awareness inside my head and shift things, I knew that was the original meaning of the word insight. We talk about that word, and most of the people, when they talk about it, they're talking about kind of going in the mind or even outside of the mind. But I believe the original meaning of the word insight is actually to be able to see inside the body. So I wanted to share all the steps while I remembered them, while I remembered all the weird things that happened along the way, because the body sometimes does some weird things when it's releasing tension that's been stored for so long. So, yeah, I have my book and it's called A Pathway to Insight.
And where can people find that?
You can find it on Amazon or you can ask your local bookstore to order it for you.
And it probably is, not probably, but it is kind of the manual or step by step guide um, to to actually what worked for you.
It is, yes. I talk about how I think everything gets stored in childhood, and we replay things over and over again, even though we don't know it. It gets so much easier to see that the further you go down the path. And then, yes, I do share the steps that I took, starting with details about EFT and how I went about doing that. And yeah, all the steps all the way to insight, being able to see inside the body.
And I mean, like, are you on social media? Do you share some of that, kind of that secret, online?
Absolutely. Yes. I have a YouTube channel where I have an EFT demo and I have a feeling your feelings. So feeling those physical sensations. I have a demo. I've got several videos on there explaining things in more detail. And I have a public Facebook page that I love explaining things on, and I'm happy to interact with anyone there. And I have my website, which has more information. I'm really wanting to talk to audiences. So if anyone's listening who has um, something coming up where they're looking for a speaker, I would love to do that.
And wow, like that is a crazy story, Anne. Like there's not much to add, to be honest. Like like it's some of the most traumatic. Like I can't see. Like I've heard crazy stories, but like finding your own mother um dead is like just a shocking and like quite a traumatic event. And you found kind of the key to that lock, like or like the key to that to getting better and all, like so it is just it is a great story you got. Great story you got.
Thank you. Oh, one of the keys was recognizing that we just store these emotions and these memories inside of our body. And it's just stuck energy that wants to release. And once we let it go, there's freedom on the other side.
Hmm. A lot to think about, really a lot to think
Yeah,
about.
good.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's good to think about it. Please think about it. Yeah, because there's freedom. There's freedom for
No doubt.
everyone. Yeah. I mean, think of all the emotions people have around COVID, right? If those things, I believe all the things are coming up for us to actually feel those emotions, recognize it's just stored energy and let it go. Because that's when it does let go, then we're emitting a different signal and we will attract a different future.
Hmm. Well, I'm gonna have to listen to that recording a few times again, I guess. You got
Good.
me. You got me tonight. Um, and this was a short one, but quite a shocking one, to be honest. So like like just the fact that like physically your body and like your whole physical being responded um we talk a lot on this podcast about like human growth, but it's usually not in the physical sense, literally physically growing. um I'm I'm going to be thinking a lot about that.
To me, it connects the mental and the emotional with the physical, and it's all, to me it's now all one, right? So even when I was working on the first step with the EFT, with the tapping, I'm releasing the emotional memories, but I believe I'm still releasing tension on the inside in a physical way. It's just releasing dis-ease in the body, but at a deeper and deeper level as we go through the steps.
Hmm. um yeah, it is. It is one last question I have for you, and what would you consider today to be a healthy daily diet, both in in the physical sense and the like the spiritual sense and the psychological sense? Like what would you consider kind of your daily routine to be better?
I'm always checking in with how I feel. That's what I do throughout the day. Where's the tension? And I focus on it and let it go. Or where's the emotion? And I focus on it and let it go. So I'm not suppressing anymore, just focusing on it and letting go. And are you asking in terms of food as well?
I mean, all of them. Like how do you like do you have like a meditation routine, or like kind of like a um like that's why like I want to cover as many aspects of it, like the spiritual, physical, mental, all of it.
Okay, yeah, no, I don't. I've never meditated. I mean, to some people, it might look like I'm meditating, but I never wanted to meditate. So I don't, but I just feel. So I feel and let it go. And I do it throughout the day. So I don't have a set routine. I do it first thing when I wake up in the morning. I do it last thing at night. And if I wake up in the night, I'm feeling, holding my awareness on it and letting the tension go. That's just what I do. It's so much a part of me now because it feels so good. It feels really good to let go of old tension. So there's no reason not to do it. In terms of food, I mean, I've decided I don't drink alcohol. I have no desire to drink alcohol. So I've been all over the place with food over the years. And now I just have what feels good to me. It's a very natural diet. Um, and I just do what I like. I eat what I like to eat. And if I have resistance around something, I know that's mine to let go of. So I can work with it. I can feel those feelings and I can let go.
Hmm. Well, Anne, that was quite something, to be honest. Like it's like I said, like there's a lot to think about, like in that short conversation. Um, really happy that we had that talk. Like for me, it is yeah, like it just is, how it is. Like it's there's a lot of introspect to do and to think and um this was quite an eye-opening conversation, to be honest, Han. Like it's surprising. Like I'm usually I would say, like I'm rarely speechless, but like I am tonight. Like it's one of those, like where you're just like, wow, okay, so now we've touched um all of the mental aspect of it, and like you literally your body responded. I could say, hey, thank you. Here's
Yeah.
2 inches. Like that's just crazy. Here's a singing voice, and here's 2 inches for you. Here you go. Go go sing a song now. Like that's fucking crazy. I'm sorry, but it's like it is shocking. Like and at the same time, like it is kind of the um almost like the conclusion of hypothesis and something people go through and people live. Like sometimes people feel lighter, quote unquote. Like when like they when they get rid of these of these almost crippling sentiments and emotions. They say they feel
Yeah.
lighter, and like they say they can feel, not this. They wouldn't use the term taller, but like I see um, physical expression being used for evacuating those bad emotions and those bad feelings inside you. Um,
Yeah.
but
I think of
because
it
you
as it
use
is part of the enlightenment process. We hear the
yeah.
word enlightenment, but to me, there's two aspects to it. There is that part of it where we actually feel lighter as we're releasing our burden. But now that I can sense on the inside, I also see that as I'm releasing tension, underneath it is light and that it was dark. The tension was dark. So all we need to do is actually find that darkness, the tension. We talk about shadow work. Find that darkness that's hidden inside of us and let that go. And underneath, we're light. So to me, that is the enlightenment process.
Well, Anne, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. For anyone that listens, all of the links, links for the books and, like all of our social medias can be found in the description of the episode. So just add up to the description and, click on all these links. Like I hope you've been listening to that. You've been as shocked and, kind of eye opened as I was. I mean, like there's a lot of things that like you suspect, but like hearing it from Han is like just crazy and like there's a lot, again, like there's a lot to think about. Thank you again for your time, man. It was really appreciated. Thank you for being open and transparent, like with your life story. Like it's a lot to share, and I appreciated every minute of it. And I hope you continue that road to enlightenment and like getting better every day. And it was a pleasure having you. Really,
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
thank you, Anne. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.